Biden administration's national security supplemental request, growing threats and aggression, particularly from the Chinese government. In short, the world is on edge.
The people of Gaza! Ceasefire now! Save the children of Gaza! Save the children of Gaza!
They are running out. Hospitals don't have the fuel they need to operate.
Palestinians aren't animals! Stop
Committee will suspend, and I again ask that those in the audience respect the people in the room and allow us to continue the hearing. The hearing will suspend until the disruption is removed.
It makes America stronger by modernizing our arsenal of democracy.
We're standing up for our interests and values, not shrinking back. Not in the face of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Not in the face of an intensifying strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific and around the world.
If the witness will suspend, and I ask that everyone again respect this hearing, we will suspend until the room is cleared.
is calling for a ceasefire. Shame on you all. The world is calling for a ceasefire. The American people don't want to support this brutal war. Stop the war. Stop the ceasefire now. Stop funding this brutal massacre that Israel is doing on the people of Gaza.
3,500 kids dead. Come on, I'm an Army colonel, I'm a former diplomat, I resigned on that war in Iraq that you talked about. That was a terrible thing, and what they're doing right now in supporting Israel's genocide of Gaza is a terrible thing too. Stop the war! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Stop aid to Israel!
I also hear very much the passions expressed in this room and outside this room. All of us are committed to the protection of civilian life. All of us know the suffering that is taking place as we speak. All of us are determined to see it end. But all of us know the imperative of standing up with our allies and partners when their security, when their democracies are threatened. That's what's happening now. We stand resolutely with them, even as we stand resolutely for the protection of innocent civilians.
Could you clarify the administration's position on a ceasefire?
We do believe that we have to consider things like humanitarian pauses to make sure that assistance can get to those who need it and that people can be protected and get out of harm's way. But we can't have a situation where there's a reversion to the status quo, where when this is over, it goes back to Hamas being responsible for the governance and so-called security of Gaza, because that's simply an invitation to repeat what happened. And again, no nation would tolerate that.
And I have repeatedly made clear to Israel's leaders that protecting civilians in Gaza is both a moral responsibility and a strategic imperative. Democracies like ours are stronger and more secure when we uphold the law of war and protect civilians. I can guarantee you that without our support, Putin will be successful. And while the Ukrainians have done amazing work, with our help in terms of the things that we provided them, if we pull the rug out from under them now, Putin will only get stronger, and he will be successful in doing what he wants to do in acquiring his neighbor's sovereign territory.
Do you believe it will be more expensive in terms of American blood and treasure?
A task that's made even more difficult as Hamas uses civilians as human shields.
We will suspend until the room is cleared.
Is calling for a ceasefire. Shame on you all.
Anti-war protesters on Tuesday repeatedly disrupted a congressional hearing on Capitol Hill, focused on aid to both Israel and Ukraine, denouncing top U.S. officials for backing what they called genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. while raising red-stained hands in the air. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was forced to pause as protesters interrupted.
As in so much that we do to advance America's national security, our defense, our diplomacy, our development must work hand in hand.
I say no more.
Both Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin testified to the Senate Appropriations Committee on Biden's request for $106 billion to fund ambitious plans for Ukraine, Israel, and U.S. border security, arguing that supporting U.S. partners is vital to national security.
I can guarantee you that without our support, Putin will be successful.
But the path forward for Biden's latest funding plan looks uncertain. Democrats solidly back Biden's strategy of combining Ukraine aid with support for Israel, as do many Republicans in both the Senate and House of Representatives. But Republicans who lead the House object to combining the two issues. Newly elected House Speaker Mike Johnson has voted in the past against assistance for Ukraine. This week, he introduced a bill to provide roughly $14 billion in aid to Israel by cutting funding for the Internal Revenue Service, setting up a showdown with Democrats. The House bill does not provide humanitarian aid for Gaza.
As you know, the defense industrial base operates in a complex way. It's an interdependent unit. Making these investments together allows us to do what's needed to strengthen the defense industrial base and to seize the benefits and efficiencies that come from making these investments together rather than making them piecemeal. We also know, as you've heard, that increasingly Russia and Iran are working together to challenge our leadership, to hem us in globally, to pose a growing threat to our own security as well as to that of our allies and partners. We're seeing the profound connections here. What happens in Ukraine, what happens in the Middle East also matters for the Indo-Pacific. Beyond Europe, we know that our allies, as well as our adversaries, as well as our competitors, are watching that conflict. They're watching our response. For our adversaries, be they states or non-states, this is all one fight. And we have to respond in a way that recognizes that. If we start to peel off pieces of this package, they'll see that, they'll understand that we are playing whack-a-mole while they cooperate increasingly and pose an ever greater threat to our security as well as to that of allies and partners.
I think it's important to remind ourselves that what happens in Ukraine and what happens in Israel matters not to just Ukraine and Israel. It matters to us. It affects our national security as well. We also have to remind ourselves that these countries are in a fight. They're fighting every day, and there are people dying every day. And in Ukraine, Putin continues to attack civilians and commit war crimes that are despicable. And so these countries urgently need the resources to ensure that they can continue to defend their sovereign territory. In Ukraine, Putin has felt that he could wait us out, and that's part of his strategy. It's the main part of his strategy. He feels that the West will get tired of supporting Ukraine, and he'll soon have his way. If that's the case, if we don't support Ukraine, then Putin wins. But Putin will not stop in Ukraine. We know that. We all know that. And so I think it's important to do what's necessary to support Ukraine and Israel and to help them defend their sovereign territory.
The overwhelming majority of the assistance thus far is getting to people who need it, and we need more. We've gotten up to over 50 trucks a day before the conflict in Gaza, before Hamas's aggression against Israel and its response. The UN and other agencies and other organizations providing relief, we're sending in between 500 and 800 trucks a day. Right now, we're up to almost 60. We're trying to get to 100 this week. That is the bare minimum of what's needed, but we've got to do it, and we believe we have mechanisms in place to make sure that that assistance gets to people who need it, not to Hamas.
For joining us today to discuss. Through the end of fiscal year, as of September 30th, there were a record 2.5 million encounters at our southwest border. This real threat to our homeland must also be addressed.
ארגנו ירי טנקים שפגע, וכרגע אנחנו מבצעים גם מסתר. מה שאנחנו נעשה לאחר מכן, אנחנו נחפש לראות אם יש ברחנים, וגם עליהם אנחנו נבצע.
אוקיי.
תרגישו שאצל בינתיים.
ברכז, הוטל 5 בשמאל, נגיד יישובים רשאי.
רשאי.
ביצוע נוסף. דרך פרוץ.
קיבלתי.
בביצוע, 20 שניות לפגיעה.
אני רלוונטי למטרות, אם אתה צריך אותי לעזור.
5 שניות לפגיעה. פגענו.
נראה פגיעה מושלמת עבור. יש לי לציר. רשאי. שוגר 15 שניות.
לא, בינתיים רק על העזר, אני רוצה שנראה שאנחנו